Marcus Williams adjusted his red tunic one final time, the fabric crisp against his shoulders after 15 years of knowing exactly how it should sit. The bearskin cap sat heavy on his head, not just from its physical weight, but from the weight of tradition it carried. At 38, he had earned his place among the Queen's Guard through dedication that bordered on obsession, proving himself worthy of standing where kings once walked. The morning mist clung to Windsor Castle's ancient stones like stubborn memories, refusing to let go of the night's coolness. He took his position at the main gate with the precision of a man who understood that ceremony mattered. Every movement deliberate, every breath controlled. The tourists would arrive soon, cameras ready, expecting the show they had paid to see. Marcus knew the drill. Stand perfectly still, ignore the comments, maintain dignity at all costs. Simple enough except when dealing with people who mistake restraint for weakness. Brandon Mitchell arrived at precisely 10:30, his phone already recording before his feet touched the cobblestones. 24 years old with the kind of confidence that comes from never facing real consequences, he carried himself like someone who believed the world existed for his entertainment. His followers knew him as at Brandon Beast, a content creator who built his empire on pushing boundaries that others respected. Today, he planned to push further than ever before. "What's up, Beast Army?" Brandon announced to his phone screen, his voice cutting through the morning quiet like a knife through silk. "Today, we're testing the limits of these royal robots. Let's see if we can crack the code on making them human again." The first video seemed harmless enough to casual observers. Brandon positioned himself next to Marcus, grinning at his camera with the practiced ease of someone who had made a career out of manufactured moments. But then his words took a turn that made several nearby tourists shift uncomfortably. "Check this out, guys. Your ancestors would be so proud right now. Look at you, guarding your master's house like a good little servant." The words dripped with mock admiration, each syllable carefully chosen to wound. Nothing says progress like putting on the uniform and protecting the same system that used to own your people. Marcus felt his jaw tighten involuntarily, but his training held firm. Years of military discipline had taught him that reaction was weakness, that the uniform he wore demanded perfection even in the face of deliberate provocation. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon, but behind that stoic facade, something stirred. Something that recognized the deliberate cruelty wrapped in Brandon's seemingly casual observation. The video gained traction quickly. Comments flooded in, a mixture of uncomfortable laughter and genuine concern. Some viewers called it edgy humor. Others recognized it for what it truly was. Brandon, however, only saw the numbers climbing and felt the familiar rush of viral success pumping through his veins. "Beast Army once more," he announced to his camera the next day, returning to the same spot with renewed confidence. "Time for the touch test. Let's see what happens when we get up close and personal with our silent friend here." This time, Brandon stepped directly into Marcus's personal space, close enough that his breath fogged in the cool morning air between them. Without warning, he extended his index finger and pressed it firmly against Marcus's chest, right over the royal insignia embroidered there. "Come on, man. I know you can feel that. What's it going to take to get a reaction out of you?" Marcus executed a perfect step backward, exactly as protocol demanded when civilians invaded the designated perimeter. The movement was so smooth, so perfectly controlled, that it looked almost mechanical. But Brandon's followers saw something else entirely. They saw movement. They saw success. The comments exploded with excitement. "He moved! He actually moved! Do it again! Push harder next time!" The validation was intoxicating, and Brandon found himself planning his next escalation before the current video had finished uploading. Day 3 brought the slap. Brandon approached his task with the confidence of someone who had convinced himself that entertainment justified everything. He positioned his camera carefully, making sure the angle would capture every moment of what he planned to call the reaction test. "All right, Beast Army, moment of truth time. What happens when we stop playing games and get real?" The slap was quick, sharp, and deliberately humiliating, not hard enough to cause physical damage, but precise enough to sting both flesh and pride. The sound echoed off the castle walls like a gunshot, causing several tourists to gasp audibly. Marcus absorbed the blow without flinching, but something fundamental shifted in his posture. His breathing became more controlled, more deliberate. His hands, previously relaxed at his sides, now gripped his rifle with just slightly more tension. The change was subtle enough that most observers missed it entirely. But those who knew how to read body language recognized the signs of a man reaching his limits. The video went viral within hours. 2 million views, trending hashtags, news outlets picking up the story. Some called it entertainment, others called it assault. Brandon called it success and began planning his next move. Time to test the hat theory, he announced to his followers the following morning. The bearskin cap, he had decided, represented everything pompous about the monarchy. Taking it would be the ultimate symbol of rebellion against stuffy tradition. Marcus saw Brandon approaching and knew instinctively that today would be different. The young man's movements carried a new aggression, a confidence born from previous successes. When Brandon's hands reached for the ceremonial headpiece, Marcus reacted with military precision, catching the wrist in a grip that stopped the movement cold. For a moment, they stood locked in position. Brandon's hand inches from the cap, Marcus's fingers wrapped around his wrist like a steel bracelet. Then, following protocol, Marcus released his grip and returned to position. But his message was clear. Some lines should not be crossed. The crowd that had gathered was larger now, drawn by word of mouth and social media buzz. They watched with a mixture of fascination and growing unease as Brandon's content became increasingly aggressive. When he spat deliberately on Marcus's polished boot, the uncomfortable murmurs grew louder. "This is getting out of hand," someone whispered. "Someone should stop this," another voice added. But Brandon was beyond hearing reasonable concerns. He was riding the wave of viral fame, drunk on the attention that comes from pushing society's boundaries. His followers wanted more extreme content, and he was determined to deliver. "Final test, Beast Army," he announced, his voice carrying an edge of desperation disguised as excitement. "Let's see what happens when we stop playing games entirely." Marcus recognized the stance immediately. Brandon was positioning himself for a real punch, not another theatrical slap. This was no longer content creation. This was assault with an audience. And Marcus knew that his restraint had reached its natural conclusion. The fist came forward with genuine force, aimed at Marcus's face with the kind of intent that left no room for misinterpretation. But 15 years of military training do not disappear because someone points a camera. Marcus caught the incoming punch with practiced ease, his hand closing around Brandon's fist like a trap snapping shut. "Your show ends here," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of authority that comes from years of genuine service. In one fluid movement, he applied a restraint technique that left Brandon face down on the cobblestones, his arms secured behind his back in a position that made resistance impossible. The gathered crowd erupted in applause. Real applause, not the artificial excitement of social media engagement, but the genuine appreciation of people who had watched dignity triumph over deliberate humiliation. Brandon's camera, still recording, captured his own defeat in the moment when entertainment crossed the line into consequence. "This is assault," he shouted into the stones. "I'm a content creator. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," the arriving police officer informed him with professional courtesy. "Though given your recent career choices, that might be new territory for you." The legal consequences came swiftly. Assault charges, harassment violations, and hate crime considerations transformed Brandon's viral moment into a very different kind of public attention. His social media accounts disappeared overnight, deleted by platforms that finally recognized the difference between entertainment and exploitation. Marcus returned to his post with quiet dignity, accepting the congratulations of his fellow guards and the respect of strangers who had witnessed his restraint. When reporters asked for his thoughts, he offered only this: "Service means maintaining dignity under pressure. Real strength is knowing when to act and when to endure." A month later, a group of schoolchildren visited the castle on an educational trip. They approached Marcus with the shy curiosity of young minds encountering living history. One little girl, clutching a drawing she had made of him in his red uniform, whispered, "Thank you for protecting everyone." Marcus could not respond while on duty, but his eyes conveyed everything that words could not express. In that moment, surrounded by children who saw him as a guardian rather than a target, he understood that dignity defended is dignity preserved for everyone who comes after. The morning mist still clung to the castle walls, but now it carried something different. Not the weight of tradition alone, but the promise that respect, once earned through service and maintained through character, becomes a legacy that no camera can diminish.